Only I am going to talk you about the development, how the development of the Buddhist art took place in the some of the important Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, whether it is Vietnam, it is Cambodia, it is Thailand, and all these areas I will be talking about. Uh, and we know that from the very beginning of the first century, first millennium AD, and up to the modern days, we have the so many chieftain groups of the Southeast Asia which have adapted the Indianized traditions of the religion, political, administration, philosophy, language, and art. And it was in the first millennium, we see first millennium that the Buddhism had been formally established in the areas of the Thailand, Burma, Java, and Cambodia. And Buddhism developed, formally established in this area in the field of art and architecture. They added as a visual aid for the propagation of the religious ideas in these countries. And these Buddhist art, stylistic art, have given the great impact on the religious and the secular life of the people in those related areas for more than 2 millennium. And thus the Buddhism they had created a current of the art in the Southeast Asia. So under this artistic trend, the many valuable artworks they created and gave rise to emergence of a social phenomena. Thus, this paper will focus on the historicity of the Buddhist art tradition in the Southeast Asia, influence and impact of the Indian Buddhist art on the South Asian art, as well as the dimensions of the Buddhist art in the South Asian culture. So we know that Funan, which is located on the lower Mekong River Delta, where at present days, which is situated at the bordering of the Cambodia and Vietnam, Southeast Asia has been the seat of the great civilization from the time memorial. It is a vast region of the Asia situated east of the Asian subcontinent and south of China. It consists of two dissimilar proportions. Next one, please. Proportion, a continental projection, which is commonly called as the mainland Southeast Asia, and a string of the archipelagos to the south and the east of the mainland. It consists 11 countries that each from India to China. The mainland Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam is actually an extension of the Asian continent. Island or the maritime Southeast Asia includes Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, and the new nations of the East Timor, which was formerly the part of the Indonesia. Within this broad outline, Southeast Asia is perhaps the most diverse region on the earth. The images and the monuments of the Buddha comprise the arts of the Southeast Asia. The Indian influence totally spread all over the Southeast Asian countries, and it is amazing to discuss that how people, culture, and the arts in the Southeast Asia makes up a rich and the interesting history. So all these things took place because of the exchange network, basically in the field of trade and commerce. And we know that trade is one of the important aspects which led to the foundation of the Southeast Asian states. And the scene of the ancient trade journeys to far distant regions have been clearly narrated in several early literatures of Indian subcontinent. In addition to the details of the traders, there are some references from the literary sources that mentions about the various items involved in the trade exchange between these regions. The Jatak also mentions about the long distance journey over land, river, as well as the sea. Indian traders, they are described as venturing into the areas of the Suvarnadip, which is known as the Southeast Asia particularly, Ratnadweep, that is Sri Lanka, and the Babera or the Baberu, which is Babylon. And there are numerous stories of the voyages, difficult journeys, as well as the shipwrecks mentioned in these literatures. In the Jatakas, there are also some references of the sailors and organized guilds conducted overseas trade with the other countries. According to the Jatakas, there are several mentions about the early contacts with the Southeast Asia by the group of the merchants, like in the Mahajanak Jatak, Sankh Jatak, and the Susondi Jatak. And these narrate the seafaring trade journeys from the important ports in India like Varanasi, Brigukaksh, Champa, and Tamralipti to Suvarnabhumi, the land of the prosperous. The early Pali text, that is the Mahanidesh, that gives us information of the ancient ports where the navigators they set sailing for trading activity located at the Gulf of the Bengal. Suvarnabhumi, Java, and Sri Lanka, Milindpanna, and the Dibyabadan, they mentions Suvarnabhumi as the most important port among the other coastal port centers because many rich merchants were interested in making their journeys here. Especially Dibyavadan tells us about the image of the Suvarnabhumi and describes it as the hilly area of the Golden Land. Jatakmala, written in the 2nd century CE, also tells us about the story of the merchants moving from Brigukaksh to the Suvarnabhumi in Suparak Jatak. Besides the religious texts, the Tamil Silpadikaram, and also it speaks about the trade items like the silk, sandal, spices, and the camphor coming from the Tondai that seems to have been lain in the Southeast Asia, perhaps to the part of Malaysia. And Buddhism, we know that is a complex, is a subject, a philosophy that has evolved in many different ways, and the various regions of the Asia is still living faith, and this is still a living faith in so many parts of these countries. Providing simple definitions for the historical development of the belief and the art of the Buddhism is therefore difficult because so many variations occur in this philosophy. The researchers of the Buddhism should be aware of these variations and point of view that we should always keep in mind. The researcher, there is a significant debate concerning the development of the Buddha image where it first occurred. So we have so many these narrations about this one, whether it developed in the areas of the Mathura or in the Gandhar areas. So I'm not going to tell you about all these things. Broadly speaking, the image of the Buddha, it emerged during the 1st century CE or AD in 2 major centers of the Indian art during the Kushan period. And one center of the artistic production was the ancient regions of the Gandhar, an area that included the northwestern part of the India, as well as some parts of the present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. And the Gandhar image have a style that is reminiscent of the Hellenistic sculptures, and the artists in these regions were certainly influenced by the presence of the Hellenistic colonies, as well as the image skilled trade and exchange that occurred in this cultural crossroads. A second area of the artistic production was associated with Mathura that I have already told you, and this was a city nearby that we know that situated nearby our capital Delhi. And here the artists, they developed a style that can be characterized as a more indigenous, less concerned with the naturalistic realism in the human form. Thus, this was a brief about the Buddhism. And now I'm not going to talk here about the origin of the Buddhist art. About this, we have so many theories by the different scholars, and many scholars, they have told that they have speculated that this is an iconic without idol, that is an iconic, as well as that which existed in the Buddhist art, where there was a prohibition against the depicting the actual Buddha in the image form. And because by the use of the various symbols, only he was venerated, and he was he was paid homage. And now, when I will be talking about the development of the Buddhist art in the Southeast Asia, we know that the iconography of when we analyze or see the iconography of the Southeast Asian sculptures, they strongly reflect the Indian influences, which began to penetrate the region early in the 1st century AD. And the Buddhism was adopted with the identifying attributes and the gestures of the deities basically unchanged, ideals of the physical perfection, and its representation in the sculptural form, however, present quite distinct local characters, such as the regional facial types, as well as the bodies, that several underlying muscular as well as local characters, such as the regional facial types and the bodies that reveal the underlying musculature and the skeleton. Following the convention of the Indian art, Southeast Asian artists, they sought to visualize the spiritual perfection of the gods in Indianized form or idealized form. Generally, the Southeast Asian Buddhist art evolved in three different stages. First one was the introductory period, which lasted about for 500 years, from the 2nd to the 7th century AD, and it was important for the acceptance and the growth of the religion. Eventually, in the close derivatives of the Indian models, or to the earliest indigenous Buddhist art before the 8th century AD. And the second was the setting of the political boundaries. And from the 8th to the 10th century AD, we see the rising of the rising of the powerful Sailendra Empire in the central Java, which produced Asia's greatest Buddhist monument of Borobudur, about which we all of us we have heard and we have just read about this one. And the emerging of the Hindu Khmer kingdom and Khmer kingdom, the Dwaravati kingdom of the Mon people in the Theravada tradition by the 7th century AD, the great kingdom of the Pagan in the Burma. By the beginning of the first millennium, Buddhism had been formally established in the areas of the Mon people of the Thailand and the Burma. Nowadays, and the greatest success of the Java region as well as the finest achievement in the Cambodia has been achieved. Third, from the 10th to the 15th century, the decline of the Cambodian power, the waning of the Japanese influence, the end of the Cham independence, and the weakening of the earlier Dwaravati kingdom, and the prominent emergence of the Thais. All these led to the third stage of the development of Buddhism in these particular areas. And from the 15th century to the modern time, the most Southeast Asian countries could retain their viable Buddhist culture till date. Now, when we talk about the Myanmar Buddhist art, according to the Mahavans, which was compiled by the Sri Lankan monk Mahamana in the 5th century AD, King Ashok, he had sent a Buddhist missionary of two monks, Son and Uttar, to Suvarnabhumi of Southeast Asia in 3rd century BC. Suvarnabhumi, presently which is known as Myanmar, has historically been associated more with the Southeast Asian culture. It shared a Mon heritage with the Thailand and was strongly influenced by the Sri Lankan Theravada. The first appearance of the distinct Burmese style as well as the oldest Buddhist sculptural remains coincide with the Pagan period. Based on the notion of the making merit by creating duplicate Buddha image in the Theravada system, the sheer number of the identical Buddha images inside the country's niches, the pointed upon temple walls, became an integral part of the Burmese art. And the dedication of the Burmese grandest temple, which is found at the Anand, we know that, which was constructed in 105, could be viewed in chronological and artistic term as the ultimate victory of the Theravada Buddhism in this area. With the urna between the downcast of the eyes, that is the characteristic feature of the casting of the Buddha and the iconographic feature of the Buddha, the stylistic garments hanging over the left shoulder, the flame-topped usnis, and the down-touching earth gesture of the victory of the Mar of the Buddha appears in the Bhumi Sparsh Mudra in these particular sculptures during the Pagan period, became the most Burmese unique artistic feature, and the many variations of the stupa across the Asian, the Burmese remains on the most artistically successful, subordinating the parts into a coherent whole that unified the original form while retaining the significant majesty of this purpose. So this kind of influence in the Buddhist art we can see in the Burmese Buddhist art from Indian subcontinent. When we talk about the Thai Buddhist art, the history of, we know that the early Thai Buddhist art represents two distinctive periods. In the Thai period, first, the Mon period or the Dwaravati period, which was from the 5th to the 10th century, when the King Khmer invaded and dominated the area. And the second was the formation of the Thai state at its early capital of the Sukhothai. That was the capital of this Mon kingdom. And the most ancient Buddhist artifacts surviving from the Mon period is in Thailand are statues in Indian Amaravati style. So this was a synchronization of this particular influence in these art of the Thai period. By about the 8th century, the Mon artists, they designed apparently patterned after prototypes from the Indian Gupta style of the human likeness of the Buddha statue. Among the favorite Dwaravati subjects was the Buddha statue of the Enlightenment in the Bhumi Spars Mudra. A second distinctive Dwaravati type was the standing Buddha, which appeared in the Bitark Mudra pose. And another distinctive and the most popular Dwaravati stone image was a wheel imitating from the Ashoka wheel, which topped the pillars of the Ashokan period. By the 10th century, the most of the Mon communities, they had absorbed in the which were those who were absorbed in the Khmer Empire, which capital was located at Lopburi, a northern part of the Thailand nowadays. After 200 years of the Khmer domination, an independent Thai kingdom was established at Sukhothai around 1240, and which lasted until 1438 AD. Two specific Buddha images of the sitting as well as the walking image represented a unique Sukhothai style, which was influenced by the Sri Lankan style in the 13th century AD. The later sculptures of the Thailand favored the bronze over the stone. The later sculptures of the Thailand favored the bronze over the stone, which was I had already told you, and it feuded to the repeat the Sukhothai model with the local variation to increase the delicacy and the greater stylization. During the Burmese War, nearly all the Thai architectures has been damaged except some of the reconstructed stupas, which indicated the stylistic directions of the later Thai art. The greatest loss had been the Thai colorful and the illuminated manuscripts before the 18th century, which were different from that of the Indian models in the size, construction, and being folded accordingly. Instead of in their architecture built from the brick with decoration in stucco and the wood. The Thai artists offer a great variety and a skillful mixture of the elements inspired by the Indian and the Sinhalese Burmese art. Coming to the Cambodian Buddhist art, it is generally believed that the Cambodia was one of the earliest Indianized kingdom in the Southeast Asia around the 1st century AD. In the 6th century, it had absorbed into its northern neighbor, the Khmer Empire, which embraced the teachings and the artistic expression of the Buddhism and the Buddhist art. Among the oldest and the pre-Angkorian sculptures is the 7th century sandstone statue of Buddha, which has been found from Prethrat, which resembles the Indian Gupta statuary or in the Indian Gupta statues. Among the Angkor city, the Suryavarman II erected the greatest or the grandest monument of architectural masterpiece, Angkor Wat, which is an enormous Hindu temple city surrounded by a broad moat and covers roughly 2 square kilometers, and it expresses the concept of the divine king as the focus of the universe. Next to the Angkor Wat is the Jayavarman II or 7th greatest Buddhist statue at Bayon, and the focal point of the enormous this Angkor Thom complex, which followed closely the earlier Khmer practice with its pyramidal towers, walls of relief carving, and the cosmological orientation with the deep-rooted central pillars, equating to the height of the spire and the rising into the sky. Located a few hundred meters from the Bayon is the next monument, the Phaya Pelier, which favored the Buddha king and the great cosmological vision over the episodes from the life of the Buddha. In the outskirts of the Angkor Wat is the next monument, the Nik Pien, which has a small group of the tank and its miniature version of the mythical Himalayan lake, which has a smaller group of the tank and is a miniature version of mythical Himalayan lake. And by the time of the Jayavarman VII, the Khmer sculptures monopolized the building that it adored and turned massive towers, wall, and terrace into the network of a sculpture, programming, and the relief carving. And the most fascinating sculptures are the portraits of the Jayavarman VII, whose images imitated the sitting and the typical Khmer fashion with the crossed legs and the best upon the Buddha Muchalin. And his images carry much of the humanness of a benevolent ruler, yet are infused with the transcendent spirit and the compassion of his patron deity. And the studies, when we talk about the studies of the Vietnamese Buddhist art, are also remarkable and important in this juncture. And the studies shows that the Vietnamese Buddhist art did blended or diffused together with the Confucianism as well as Taoism later after the annexing of the Champa kingdom in the 9th century. And the Vietnamese Buddhist art inherited the Champa Hindu style and being influenced by the Chinese Mahayana school of Pure Land and the Vietnamese by the dynasty was growing popularity or the worshipping of the Amitabh Buddha that and holding a wish fulfilling jewel in one hand and a salvific gesture in other hand among the devotees hopeful of being reborn in his celestial pure land in the next life. A representative figure of compassion in the 12th of the thousand arms Buddha, that is Bodhisattva Avalokiteshwar, who is worshipped in the who is worshipped as the laughing Buddha or the Buddhai, is revealed in the Mahayana culture as an incarnation of the Maitreyi Bodhisattva with its image of a fat monk. And the scholars, when the scholars regarding the Malay Buddhist art, they are of the view that this needs a noted that the oldest known Buddhist text carved in the Southeast Asia dated paleographically to the 5th century in the Kedah bears the phrases from the Buddhist law of cause and the effect. And roughly 90% of the artifacts of the Indian religious character in the Malay Peninsula, such as statuary and the temples, are Buddhist. And in early 11th century, the center of the Sumatran Buddhism shifted from the central and the northern parts of this island. And a copy of this particular text is produced in 1071 AD, which mentions about the Java among the important Buddhist center. But Srivijaya and the Kedah are no longer included in the Buddhism that had long existed in the northern tip of the Sumatra. And when we talk about the Indonesian Buddhist art, it was primarily evidence from the various sources that the Buddhist art in the Java that incorporates deities and the motifs derived from the Hindu mythology. The symbolism of the mountain as the residence of the god and the wish-fulfilling trees as a feature of the heaven can be found in the pre-Buddhist belief in India. By the late 8th century, the relationship with the Pal Empire in the India provide the sources for the Vajrayana school, which produced 240 shrines of the Chand Sevu, one of the largest and the largest complex mandala plan in this particular area of Indonesia. All important Buddhist monuments of the first millennium are located in central Java. The most significant Indianized influences on these are the islands are the Borobudur that we know, that the largest Buddhist and the global wonder monument in the world, which was this designated built by the Sailendra dynasty or by the or the king of the Silent Empire of the Central Java in the 18th to the 9th century. And the Mount Meru or the word mountain with a central stupa at the peak. The center of the universe is the idea of the man-made mountains and the shrine, carved rocks, walls, as well as the beginning of the lowest level represents the realm of the desire and the hell states among these art. Above it all are the series of the 5 terraces and the stone walls, corridors sculpted with the bas relief narrations of the Buddha's biography. And when we talk about the relationship between all these countries, we can find that the cultural heritage of the Champa, that is basically the Vietnam, appears to be very ancient one that can be traced from the Dwapar era, which was the establishment of the Mukhalinga of the Swambhu Shiva in the which we know about in the Ramayana also. And this image Sagar, that is it recalls that the king of the Ayodhya, which is mentioned in the Ramayana, and the epigraphic records mention the beginning of the rule in the kingdom of the Champa. And it is the god Shambhu or the Lord Shiva who sent Uroza to occupy the throne of the Champura or that Champa. And historically, the kingdom of the Champa began in the end of the 2nd century AD. So throughout this just a glance out about the spread and this development of the Buddhism in these countries, we know that the studies of the various Southeast Asian countries, a wide variety of the Buddhist art have been incorporated as the inhabitants of the particular realm within the Buddhist cosmos. As reflected from the various examples, the cultural interchanges in the aspects of the religion, art, architecture, or intangible cultural heritage, such as the traditional practices and the belief, influences each other than one side belonging to the prototype for the other Buddhist, for the other. The Buddhist art and the architecture in the Southeast Asia of the different periods and the culture has its own uniqueness as well as identity, from which we get so many examples of the architectural masterpieces which can be distinguished from each other as an important representation of the various architectural style. And every site or the every religion or the every region is reliable or is related to the history of the Buddhist propagation in the different periods of the time. Hence, it can be stated that the Buddhist art that is spread widely into these Southeast Asian country, and thus it can be concluded or it can be said that the Indian immigrations and the ideas were the major influences upon the South Asian countries, which shaped the cultural expression in terms of the art, mythology, religion, and literature. So thank you very much.